Hey, you're going to be okay. I'm Elizabeth May, and my functional health practice helps people heal when they've exhausted traditional options. When no one else can figure your health challenges out, my team helps you resolve symptoms and restores your health. You're listening to my podcast where we'll hear stories of healing chronic illness from a root cause approach. Today, we're exploring how our emotions, the ones that we think we've dealt with, can actually get stored in the body and influence everything from our mood to our physical health, weighing them down, even blocking or limiting our ability to get well. We're also going to talk about a therapy called NET that can help the body let go emotionally. Sara Semenick is here with me today. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist who works with folks struggling with all host of issues. She has 20 years of ministry experience and also has a special passion for working with women and families and mind, body, emotional issues. She was one of the first practitioners that I was introduced to when it came to NET, and I feel like she just does such a great job of explaining the vastness of the tool that NET is. So, Sara, I'd love for you to kind of share, how did you come to find NET?
Okay, well, thanks for letting me be here and share about it. I'm super passionate about NET, only mainly because it was a part of how I got started in my own healing journey.
Mm.
So I was introduced to it through my chiropractor, woo started doing some crazy woohoo voodoo stuff on me, is what I thought. I was like, what is happening here? But I found an immediate change in my physiology and just even in like I just started seeing differences in how I was showing up. My nervous system started to click. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
so mind blowing for me that I'm like, I don't know what you just did, but like I would like to learn more. And so that kind of just kicked off a journey. That was about 10 years ago that I was introduced to NET. I know it was so long ago, but yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got started. I got introduced to it. And then I just started asking more questions. And so the more my practitioner worked on me, like the more I was learning,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually decided to go get trained myself in it because it was like, do more people need this? Like, I love how this works with the body. So yeah, that was part of my journey is that in the midst of my healing journey, I actually went back at the age of 37 to get my master's in counseling,
Mm-hmm.
and therapy because I felt like it was just in line with therapeutic work, seeing how the body holds on to everything that's ever happened to us. I know that book, The Body Keeps the Score, is one of, it's on my top shelf, like learning about that and then seeing how in therapy we can work some of that stuff out, seeing patterns. Like that's kind of the 30,000 foot view of or the summary of how I came to NET and integrating it into my practice.
Mm-hmm. So you really kind of came. So did you come to NET first, and then you were like, "Oh, okay, I want to move into therapy, and then I also want to integrate this into because people are needing emotional and physical worlds colliding."
Exactly. And so my undergrad, like 20 years plus ago, was in counseling, and I just never did
Okay.
anything with it. So it being introduced to NET, discovering the power of it and how it works with the mind and body, like I just started piecing it together, doing my own basically processing after I would have all these NET sessions. I'm like, what just happened? And so I would go home and journal and do therapeutic practices and try to make all those connections on my own. And I'm like, man, wouldn't it be helpful if I had a therapist or a counselor who could like
Mm.
walk through this stuff with me? Because to integrate therapy practices and just the modalities with that, like narrative
Mm.
therapy, internal family systems, like
Mm.
all of it goes beautifully with NET. So yeah, I started with NET, then kind of had this idea of like, I would love to couple these things together.
Mm-mm. So I've definitely referenced NET on several client episodes, and several clients have gone to NET and shared their experiences. But can you kind of define for us in simple terms, what is NET? What are we doing here? What's going on?
The simple way that NET expresses itself is it's a mind body stress tool. That's literally at the basis of it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
add a ton to it when I do it in therapy,
Mm-hmm.
but that is the simple definition. It's a mind body stress tool that we have stressors in our body, triggers and different stress patterns that are unresolved. And so another definition of being able to describe those unresolved stress patterns. So NET is a mind body technique that uses a methodology of finding and removing neurological imbalances related to the physiology of unresolved stress patterns. We call those unresolved stress patterns neuro emotional complexes. I had to
Mm-hmm.
read that because, that's what
Yeah.
it's like. I am artistry part of NET, but coming back to even like, all right, what did they just, how did I learn in certification? But
Yeah.
that's how they describe it, is that we have these unresolved stress patterns that we need to clear out. And when those are cleared, meaning like we finally process them and let them out, our bodies and our nervous systems can kind of go back to that homeostasis.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts of NET and kind of how we get clients maybe open to it more is their first aid stress tool, which is super easy. It'll be in the show notes, but it is kind of like the most basic and most comprehensive do-it-yourself NET for, acute stress stuff. And it's really, really interesting because you can really feel a shift in your physical body that closes out that stress loop. And we talk a ton about stress loops and stress as an immune trigger, all of the different kinds of stressors and how that interacts with the body. And also that stress that just like hangs out too long can then be corrosive to the body, or we cannot process things. And then it can also be corrosive or start to create more of those patterns you were kind of talking about. So in NET, like if I'm coming to an NET session, how is this different for me than like a traditional talk therapy since you are also a therapist and coming from that side of things?
So if somebody's coming to me just for an NET session,
Hmm.
which I'm always going to mix in a little bit, just because
Of
I think
course.
it's beneficial. But generally, people are going to come to me and state, "Okay, I'm having these bodily issues or these and we can start NET one of two ways. We either will do a body entry of like, oh, my neck, it just, I keep going to the chiropractor, I'm going to physical therapy,
Hmm.
it's just not, I keep catching on my shoulder or my knee or any kind of body part that hurts. We do a body entry. So we would contact those points. I would have you contact the point that hurts, and then I would have you contact the emotional points on your forehead. So we have two emotional vital points that are right above our eyeballs. So
Hmm.
I would do some testing to see, okay, is there an emotional component to that pain? If it is, there's an emotional, the NEC, like we talked about, there's a complex there that we can clear. So you can start by clearing the body of whatever body ailment you have.
Mm.
Or
So
you, does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. And so for the listeners too, like there is a crossover between kind of lots of different methodologies, if you will. Like in our first podcast episode, we talked in the Emotions Immunity podcast. I introduced the idea of the Chinese medicine body clock and then also where organs and emotions correlate with one another. And then you just mentioned the emotional points. Those come from acupuncture, is that right?
Yeah, the acupressure points, I
Mhm.
don't have all my stuff around, but yeah, you can
Yeah.
look at body pressure points and acupressure points and things like that. So, we have a brain point, and then we have emotional points, and we have a polarity point, and then we have, the lung points and yeah. So the whole body has all these points that you can work with. So
Hmm.
yeah, it comes from that Chinese acupuncture background.
Combo, yeah. So also different practitioners can practice because it is very, I mean, it's very, there's lots of different things, I guess, woven together. And your side, of course, is as a therapist, but what would you maybe say to somebody considering this? Because my experience is I've had NET done with many practitioners, and it can be so different. If I'm working on something that I have more emotional ties to, and I know that I need to process and maybe verbalize, I'm going to go one direction versus if I have a literal pain in my neck, and then I'm going to be more chill and go a different direction. But what is how does somebody choose somebody
How do
to
you,
work
I
on them
think,
with NET?
right, I think exactly what you're talking about is looking at what is your end goal, right? So there's plenty of stuff that I can go to my chiropractor for. I was going to an acupuncturist in Kentucky, he do NET. Like
Mm.
there's different, and each practitioner is going to do it in a different way. Like we're
Hmm.
all trained, if they're certified, we're all trained in, here's how you do it. And
Hmm.
then everybody kind of turns their art on and does it in a different way. But if it's like, man, I have pain, I just want to get it gone, or I'm working with toxins and nutritional stuff, you might want to see, a body-based chiropractor type person.
Hmm.
Okay. And like, as you said, if there's emotional trauma or different things like family dysfunction or coming from an abusive relationship or things like that, that need to be handled a little more gently, um,
Hmm.
a little more in depth. Okay. Like you might want to see a mind practitioner like me, who is well versed in both trauma. Like you need somebody who's trauma informed, who can kind of walk through when you're getting triggered and how to work through that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And so it's for me, I always think about it when I would go to see a therapist for NET, that's me wanting new skills and tools and maybe even needing more support around the emotional components And it's not that like one is bad or I would really go to either one of you, but going to like a chiropractor or a body worker, there tends to be more of an emphasis on the physical release, which can be really cool because you can really get like I just remember being in an office listening to an older lady who came in and she had this shoulder thing and they're like, you've been having this shoulder thing for so long. What do you think is the deal? They went through like her habits, her cooking, the way she did all these things. And she literally just like when they got done exploring it, she's like, my sister needs to come to see you. She is a pain in my neck. She is on all my nerves all the time. And he was like, tell me more about your sister being a pain in your neck. And she was like, she
Yeah.
just, I mean, and that was really I listened to him kind of walk through the process with her and the release from that. Of course, I don't know what happened after that, but there definitely was a connection there for her. Like when they started talking about when issues with the sister would flare up, then her body would flare up. And so there is really that correlation
There
between.
really is the connection and making sure that you have the right professional to lead you through that.
Hmm.
Now, like a chiropractor or somebody who is just trained in the physiological stuff, like their lane is body work,
Hmm.
right? If something emotional comes up, which oftentimes it does, when you start going back to where you first learned it or what first happened, oftentimes it is based around trauma,
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
so it's reminding, like NET is not psychology or psychiatry. It is not talk it out therapy. And
Mm-hmm.
so if some of those things come, it even says like if things come up, like make sure you're seeing a licensed professional who does know how to handle that stuff. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes you're like, oh my gosh, this is about my abusive ex, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, let's go get you adjusted. And it's like, well, I just, all this stuff came up, you know? And so
Yeah.
I think just being mindful of you, if it's okay and you feel like comfortable with your chiropractor and they can sit a little longer with you with that, but just know if you need some extra support, you might want to consider a mind practitioner who's
Hmm.
just more therapy oriented in that.
And I think two people know. They know their own story and they know their own experience. And I'll have clients come and say, when this situation recurs in my health, then my infection stuff recurs in my health. Okay, well, if we're going to go start tapping into that, what are all the situations in that file drawer? You always talk about that maybe are connected to the shoulder. And are you going to be able to, I don't know, like withstand and process those things, or do you need more support to do that? So maybe let's walk through somebody comes in, maybe more of a situational, because I love how structural NET is. Like you said, it's not like psychotherapy, it's not psychiatry. It really is like this very direct process that has a methodology that really I enjoy it because it makes short work sometimes of big emotional things. So like in talk therapy, you could literally be talking about something for like months on end, but NET will kind of pull out those root connections. So say somebody comes in with maybe I'll let you lead. Like what would be a good example of something like that and how would you would work through a client session?
Yeah. So people come in with all sorts of things. Oftentimes boundaries is a really good, I can't handle conflict or, "Oh, I hate it, or I can't set boundaries. They're going to get mad at me or they're going to leave or just this person agitates me or, and so it's like, there's a physiological response happening. They're not able to achieve their goals or, I want to be in relationship with this person or I don't want to be in relationship with this
Mm,
person. I mean, there's so many different, so I'm trying to like, all right, let's focus in on one thing.
hmm.
So if somebody came in and they just said, I want to be able to have boundaries, like they're a doormat and people are taking advantage of them all the time.
Mm.
And oftentimes those people are sitting on my couches. And so
Mm.
boundaries a lot, but part of it is learning to understand where did you become a doormat, and so what's blocking you from being able to set those boundaries. And so I know we talked about the body entry before. Another way that I work with somebody is around mind entry, and there's two different ways that even starts. You can even visualize like a feeling, like call up that picture feeling when you're wanting to set a boundary and your
Mm.
mother-in-law is there or your ex-husband's there and they're just coming at you and you're like, ah, like you can call up a feeling or that physiological response pretty quick of
Yep.
like, I want to set a boundary, you're mouthing me, get out of my house, we do
Hmm.
all this internalizing stuff, but like you can call up the feeling and NET can kind of go with that feeling. What emotions are present in that physiological response? And so what ends up happening is NET is able to help you clear out. I'm feeling insecure. I'm feeling not just fear, but impending doom. Like impending doom is this like the worst case scenario. If I speak up,
Hmm.
everyone's going to leave my house, like, and then Thanksgiving's ruined and, all these things like, there's a physiological response because your body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. It
Mm,
is your emotional reality, and that's what NET works with. It doesn't mean that those things actually happened, but you perceived them or you fear that they're going to happen, and your
mhm,
body's responding in the same way. And so, what NET does is if we can do the feeling, or we can actually create a phrase that says, I'm okay
mm,
setting boundaries. And that I'm okay statement is like, I'm testing to see if my body is congruent with setting boundaries.
mhm.
And I love that because the body, it keeps the score. It will throw you under the bus. It's like, yeah, I'm fine setting boundaries up here in
Yeah.
my head. I could do that. And then my body's like, oh, heck no, no, you're not. And it'll bring up this triggered response of an unresolved pattern of maybe when you were a kid and you were observing things what happening around you, or you tried to set a boundary and got, in trouble, or does that make sense? So as we're working through NET, we're clearing out whatever is blocking you from that thing that you want. So
So it's
that
kind
one,
of,
go ahead.
I was just saying, it's kind of taking that like original event or the original, well, not the original event, kind of what you're feeling, your blocking factor. I can't set boundaries, or I'm having a hard time setting boundaries. Figuring out maybe how that feels, or where did that original event come? Like there are different ways to go with different things. You could just go back to what are the emotions that come up with that event? And then we move into like, what other, say with the boundaries thing, there's like resentment or something, then we're going to go back to like, was there an event before now where you felt resentment that kept you from setting boundaries? So that every time you go to do it now, subconsciously or sometimes consciously, I mean, things would come out for me where I'm like, oh, literally before we even just said what that was, my brain thought of it. And then you said, okay, hey, what about around this age, whatever. The brain kind of keeps all of those, and the body does, keeps all those things stacked up together where they can be these like subconscious triggers. But NET kind of helps to detangle
Yeah.
and bring to our awareness in a different
I
way.
always kind of think of it like a funnel. It's like
Mm,
you down to that precise moment when that pattern happens. Yeah,
hmm
like you said, you can do like the 2-minute version of it. Like I can just do what are the emotions? Let's clear them out. If you
hmm
want to go deeper, you can, once you kind of identify that first emotion that's present, it's like, okay, I felt fear around setting boundaries, like, that somebody was going to get mad at me. Well, what's the worst part about somebody getting mad at you? It's like, well, I would be a disappointment or I would be rejected. Oh, that's rejection. Okay, so what was the first time that I felt fear about getting rejected, right? And so
hmm
that takes you, I mean, literally in your tissues, like all of the stuff, your brain can go back almost instantaneously. So it's like, yeah, when I was 5, I had fear around feeling rejection in my kindergarten class. Oh my gosh, like this makes so, and it's like
Yeah.
all of that physiology comes back up. And
hmm
so in NET, it's a combination of like cognitive psychology of thinking
hmm
through these things, but it's also a mixture of like, we use those pressure points and
hmm
like, it's kind of like a guide to those emotions of like finding in the body where they're located, right? So fear is going to be, and that under my ring finger on my left hand, I know it's going to be either in the bladder or the kidney, right? That's the meridian it's on. And so I access that point by pushing that button. I connect it to those emotional points. I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, when I was in kindergarten, I feared rejection. I didn't want to get left out on the playground. So, so I'm like
hmm
all of that together. I'm thinking and I'm taking deep breaths, and I'm allowing the body to finish that process because my
hmm
poor 5-year old never finished that process. And that
Yeah.
unresolved pattern stayed stuck in there. So every time I came close to conflict or setting a boundary, my 5-year old's like, no, ma'am, like we don't do this, we run,
hmm hmm
That's how to show up as an adult. It's like, I'm not showing up as my adult self, I'm showing up as my 5-year old.
hmm
An
This is
adult
where it's
doesn't
so good
perform.
because it's literal like that, where you really do go back to the original event. Where I think about talk therapy has a wonderful place, but sometimes when you're trying to figure out why do I keep doing this thing, and then we'll just build habits around it, there can be a very physiologically stuck thing that is just a very literal, this happened and it taught you this lesson, and this is now the lesson that you work from. And then that, what would you call that like closure part? It's like the end of the I don't know, like the NET loop or what do you call them? Like one event you go through and then all the way at the end we kind of do the
Yep. And you resolve that tension, it is
oh,
complete,
resolution.
resolution.
Yeah.
But again, what it does is it kind of moves you out of the subconscious, unconscious brain. Like when there's an emotional complex, like I always kind of imagine the brain like this, and it's like that amygdala gets
hmm
hijacked. You're living out of the subconscious, unconscious brain, and that prefrontal cortex is way offline.
Yeah.
So by the time NET is finished and we resolve that, we're bringing that prefrontal cortex back online, which means my adult self at 45
Hmm.
is now looking at that by saying, like, you know what, like, I'm going to give my 5-year-old a break. I'm going to say, you don't have to keep thinking that. I really need you to stop because I want to be able to show up and set boundaries in my life today. So
Hmm.
at the completion of it, I often will ask my clients, it's like, okay, how are you thinking anything different? How are you feeling? You know, how do you want to take a next step forward in that? They're like,
Hmm.
I'm totally okay setting boundaries. Like, I'm going to do it right now. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, and
Yeah.
so it's like your adult self kind of steps back in the driver's seat. I always love the bus analogy, because when we have those unresolved patterns, like all those emotions that are in the back of my bus are jumping that red line and like driving my bus. And now I'm acting like a 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So what it does is it brings about self-awareness
Mm-hmm.
and teaches us how to self-regulate and understanding, like, we move through stuff all the time, right? But and we complete processes throughout our lives, but then there are some that just get unresolved. They get stuck.
Hmm.
And like there's just certain things that'll bring it out. As you talked about those unresolved loops, you know, we try to complete the loop so that they can, you know, be done.
Quick break. If you've been curious about homeopathy, this is your sign to try it. At Hey Hey Homeopathics, we've created liquid remedies for everything from sleep and skin to digestion and beyond. Safe, gentle, and designed for real life. And if you're a practitioner, our preferred professionals line opens the door to powerful tools like no-sodes, miasms, detoxers, and more. Anyone can shop, but professionals can apply for exclusive access. Visit heyheyhomeopathics.com and start your path to natural healing today. Yeah, I think the stress loop is like the best thing because we all know what it's like to go through a stressful situation and not have closure to it, like where you have to go home or you have to go away from the thing or you have to set a boundary with somebody who you can't have closure with. But your brain still will try to close that situation out. And at some point, you just have to move on. But those are the things that can hang out in our body and really keep us stuck. And it's similar in some ways. I don't know if you would agree or not, but kind of like the same premise of like EMDR or other somatic type therapy where we are trying to go back and revisit and pull out original events. But I think the beauty of NET is one, you're not re-experiencing always the original event. We're doing any re-experiencing for like a letting it go purpose, not a like where an EMDR, you're like walking all the way back through the thing. And then you're also able to use, my brain went out my ear. So really, it's more of like the physical part of closing out the situation. I always think about it too with our families who have PANS and PANDAS children. So their children are greatly dysregulated for a season. Maybe they weren't like that before until the infectious issue. Or I also see lots of children on the autism spectrum working on physical things or working to increase their functionality, and well-being. Parents who live in that environment and raise and care for kids in that way struggle so much with like their self-care in that season because you're just being triggered left, right, upside down, and backwards. It doesn't really make sense because you have a child who's going through a lot. And I always think that NET is such a good thing because in those situations, a lot of time there are triggering events or original events where like something happened and your kid does something, you love them, and you're like, in my cognitive brain, I would not respond like this, but in my hairline of the moment triggered space, I respond like this. And when clients have gone through NET, they've been able to make those connections and kind of get to a more level place again so that they're not as triggerable and they're able to really like regulate better because it is such a stress-based tool. I think it's so powerful for learning to kind of a lot of our Spanish parents, honestly, they're just going through stuff that none of the rest of us experience, understand, or anything like that. And it's so bizarre that I think really NET's been powerful there. But what does it look like when somebody's like emotional block starts to heal or the body like lets go of something and NET, is being helpful?
What does that look like?
Yeah.
I
Even in
think,
session, I mean.
yeah, in session, it's like it is one of my favorite things to sit back and watch somebody process. I'm the facilitator, right? So I
Mhm.
can do all the things, but like I'm still not necessarily feeling what they're feeling. I'm watching somebody go through the process of oftentimes like they might even start showing up as a little 8-year-old or their body posture goes back to what that little girl or that boy was like. I mean, it really is phenomenal to watch people move from like they're angry, right? And all of a sudden they're crying. I'm like, oh, we've moved to another one. And it's like, sometimes it can be so fast, right? And it's like giving them like even an understanding of like, yes, you're moving into something else. Like, again, you don't have to relive the thing. And I never let somebody like you should never feel like you're 8 again. Like you're not in that. Like you are watching a movie. Like
Mm,
that's how you try to separate people from like being re-triggered. Like it is not my job to like it's my job to make sure you don't get re-triggered. Like you're
mm.
not in that 8-year-old spot again. Like you're, your 45-year-old self watching your 8-year-old, and almost like in a what I love is being able to even reframe or recreate a memory where my 45-year-old self is going to my 8-year-old, and I'm going to sit with her and I'm
Mm.
going to coach her through and let her know, I'm like, baby, you do not need to think that anymore. Like you are valuable. You are loved. Like there is nothing to fear. Like I got you, and giving them like the support they needed that they may not have gotten in that moment. And
I love
so, yeah.
the affirming kind of, I don't know, the surround the dragon statements is kind of what ADT refers them to, or refers to them as. But those statements where you almost are kind of like, to me, it's like a brain rewiring situation. Yes, it's challenging to see if whatever we just processed, like, okay, I can now set boundaries. We're going to see if that's really true or not. But also, it is such a beautiful way to give the brain like that new messaging and new conditioning of like, yo, I can set boundaries. Like we're going to be setting them now. I want to set the boundaries. That part of it is so, I don't know, I feel
Like,
like it moves you forward. Like that's a beautiful part of NET is the forward movement portion.
kind of helps you understand. And sometimes, like, just getting congruent with the statement, like, I'm okay setting boundaries, or I'm even okay with boundaries. Like, there's so many layers. I'm okay
Mm-hmm.
even if I don't set boundaries. Like, I'll even go back to the negative to make sure that they are congruent. It's like I work
Hmm.
with people who want to lose weight. Like, well, let's check I'm okay even if I don't lose weight. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Like, that usually is a bigger, there's shame, there's insecurity,
Mm-hmm.
there's never going to be loved. And it's like that would elicit even more so. Like, you can be congruent with losing weight, but you are not congruent with not losing weight. You know what I'm saying? And so you
Hmm.
can do that with anything. Like, so, but it takes you like, hey, my body is okay. I am congruent with setting boundaries, but am I ready? Am I willing? Am I able? Am I worthy to set boundaries? Like,
Hmm.
so what it does is just kind of fine tunes, like where else in the roots system, like, do we need to kind of pull out? So there really is nothing blocking you.
Yeah.
Because then when people leave the session, it's like, okay, what are my next steps? What does this look like for me to start setting boundaries?
Hmm. Hmm. All of that stuff that you just said, listeners can like look up. You could Google an NET master chart and it shows kind of like all the emotions and all of the connections and the organs. Yeah, it looks like that. And then it also has that list of the Surround the Dragon sentences. And like they can definitely be deviated from. Like I've worked with practitioners who bend them one way towards my story or situation that we're working on at that moment. But that part of it, it's like such a good system. It's such a thorough system. And then it's so cool too because you can be having, I mean, I've had clients with like recurrent gallbladder issues, but they don't have any stones. They don't have anything going on. And I'm like, well, why don't you go see somebody for NET? And then let's like, you do what you're doing for me. And then like, let's loop back up in a month or so. That kind of situation. Can you share with us examples or even just, what does it look like to have something that's just a physical body thing and go to NET for resourcing or, resolution around that?
Sure. I think women issues, we always look at our hormones, our organs, like all the things. And it's like, oftentimes, so what Dr. Walker, who's the founder of NET, what he created was the home run formula. And so he worked oftentimes with structural stuff, but he worked with toxins, he worked with
Mm-hmm.
nutrition stuff, but he found that even before you get to any of that, was the emotional component. So NET and emotion work, that's like first base. Then you head to toxins and clearing out what shouldn't be in the body,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's kind of a both and of like there's emotional stress patterns that are going to be blocking or, creating toxicity in those specific organs, right? And then nutritional supplementation, it's like, okay, now let's feed the body now that we're clearing out stuff. It needs support. And then you might need structural adjustment. And
Mm-hmm.
so oftentimes I might see like a woman coming in, well, I'm taking thyroid stuff or I'm doing this. And it's like, well, let's just check that little butterfly organ to see like what you're holding there, you know?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes it's like, let's kind of take a step back for a minute to look at those emotional, like getting that toxicity out of there. Because again, I kind of think of it as like a bucket. If I'm pouring water into a bucket, I'm giving it all this nutrition and I'm, cleaning out toxins, but it's like there's still emotional toxicity there. That's like those holes are going to stay there because it's like it continues to hold that energy, those different organs do. And so it's like it's weakening it. But yeah, it's like, I got it, guys. I'm just like pouring water on a fire that just keeps going. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
And so I think always starting with emotional components is kind of what he figured out.
So maybe let's go with like a what we would think of as like a physical problem. You kind of mentioned like female health issues, or I mentioned the gallbladder. How would that process look, or what would be connected? Because we know the Chinese medicine body clock and the connection between emotions and organ stuff, but like what could that, I don't know, a pathway for something like that look like, or maybe a story that's related to body parts?
Um, Good body part story. There's always
Mhm.
something I feel like. But even my own personal story, I probably saved my gallbladder, to be honest.
Tell us about it
Yeah.
if you want to.
That's the easiest thing I can be really honest. Like my gallbladder, liver, like it was just, I lived a life of emotional repression, right?
Mm,
I lived in a world where, to be careful, but like in the Christian world, like women are to be, seen and not heard sometimes. And it
mhm,
was like I lived in a world where emotionality. I'm a sensitive person. I'm a very emotional person. Like things
mhm,
move me, and it's like I would cry at a lot of different things, right? So I
mhm,
was taught from a very young age, suppress, suppress, suppress. Those things are not
mhm,
welcome here, or you're too much, or you're this. And so I just learned like anytime I would have anger, that was the big one. Is that like I'm an Enneagram 9. I'm
mhm.
apparently always angry. And I've been like, I'm not angry, I'm fine. And so and, discovering this later in life, as perimenopause starts to kick in, I'm like, I don't even care. I'm angry right now. And so
Here's
I'm
the
like,
deal.
and so discovering that about myself, I learned, and I think, intervention came at just the right time to start clearing things out. And I spent years clearing out. It was always in the green, which was, the gallbladder, liver, meridian,
Mm-hmm.
resentment, anger, emotionally repressed, indecisive, irrational, frustration, like all of those emotions. I just kept clearing out, right? And I'd be on
Hmm.
the wood spray, which would be like clearing it out, like more clearing out.
Yeah.
And then I would be on beta food, which was like beets and like, let's heal it, because
Yeah.
honestly, had I gone too much longer, I probably would have lost my gallbladder. It would have become so inflamed that I probably would have lost it. So I really do attribute NET and just the kind of work that you do to be able to like clear and heal naturally. For me, it was a huge relief.
Yeah.
So that was a huge part of my early journey for sure.
It
Um,
is. It's interesting too how pathogens and parts of the body have certain pathways, right? So like anger and resentment and, you know, repressing emotion is that like liver gallbladder area. But I always think about my people who come and they're like, I have cyclical parasites. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's see what kind of immune imbalance you have. Because just from functional immunology perspective, if that side of the immune system is staying inflamed, it's not resolving parasite stuff either. And also, so often the proclivity for a body to accept a parasite is mimicked in the way that they function with other people, that they're happy to be taken advantage of, that people can take from them, or the reverse can be true also. But it's really interesting. And then you can trigger, like you can see a person deal with their parasitic type symptoms more when there is a relationship in their life, or there's even just a one hit instance where somebody's like taking from them and they're not okay with that. And that creates stress in the body that, in my opinion, if you're not able to release on your own and you have this recurring physical thing, NET is a place where it like steps in and helps us to figure out like what are the roots of the thing that like allow me to keep resonating with this pattern? Like what is the part of me that allows everything to take from me? So then I also have this pathogen that is a taker because a parasite is. It's literally here to like eat on your stuff and hang out and just exist using your resources and kind of bringing you down. But like that so can mimic relational things, and you won't get rid of one, in my opinion, if you don't get rid of the other one. You will stay
100%. Like
on the
what you're
merry-go-round.
talking about reminds me, like, and she is a recent client that has struggled through cancer. And I
Mm,
seen her before the cancer came, and she is exactly like what you talked about. She's the give, give, give. She's an Enneagram 2, has always been like, lowest on the totem pole and doesn't have any self-worth. And like, again, as we started working and kind of like inflating herself and kind of working through where she learned some of those, like I'm unworthy, or I'm not loved unless I do some of these things or let people in like this, like the cancer started, like it was so powerful to watch her kind of learn some of these new foundational pieces of like, no, I am worthy and I am a fighter and I am like, you can, she was starting to set boundaries. I'm like, yeah, like
yeah.
able to overcome cancer. Like, and now she is cancer free, which is like phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I wonder if her fight system would not have been activated had she not been clearing some of that old garbage out, you
Hmm.
know?
Mhm. I always think it's interesting too, sometimes when cancer pops up for someone because we do nutritional support. And so often we'll see women who've gone through a breast cancer journey or another female organ journey, and there is a relational connection, and it usually like all surfaces at the same time that their relationship is breaking. Maybe kids are going off to college, like all of these things where their role was like the centerpiece and they were kind of like allowing themselves to be taken from all the time. When that shifts, it's like everything at one time physically, emotionally comes up. And we've seen that pattern repeat so many times. But it's still like, it's boundary stuff. And the immune system is boundaries. And it mimics our boundaries, truly. Like your brain runs your nervous system, your cells follow the directions of a nervous system. And if we don't have good boundaries, then a lot of times, physical things are able to take advantage of that boundary keeping immune system. But
I also think about like women who struggle with infertility getting kind of underneath the surface of like, well, let's work on your uterus, let's work on your ovaries, let's work on your
Mhm.
body's messaging system around sex, or is my body even a safe place? Oftentimes, I mean, I've worked with people who struggle with infertility, and there's been sexual trauma, or there's been assault, or something, and so it's like the body's still holding on to all of that messaging, and so it's like if your body feels unsafe because of stuff in the past, it's not going to be this like, let's bring a baby into this, or let's, invite, a new life in here. Because like oftentimes the baby might even say like, this does not feel safe to, and so it's like
Yeah.
energetically,
Yes.
like that is a human being that feels things too. And
Mhm.
so it's been so powerful to work with my mamas who give me permission to like work on their babies or work on clearing out some of that stuff so they can be a more hospitable, like safe, calm environment for a baby to come into the world. Like I've learned so much in that realm. It's mind blowing.
That's really important work too, because we obviously work with so many kids, but the first few years of your life from conception to like 3, babies' nervous system is built off of mama's nervous system. And so if mama is regularly triggered, dysregulated, just not a steady place, then that is going to complicate on some level baby's health. And there's certainly redemptive parts of that. And it doesn't mean if you have this, then you're going to have that. And also the two things do work together. And that's such a gift to work on basically two people and to create more wholeness in two spaces from past issues. It reminds me too of like our clients who are blocked about moving forward. So sometimes we'll start care and this is a new world to them. They've gone to the pediatrician and been exhausted by it, or just like the kid is still sick. We're trying something different. And I'm like, okay, let's start slow. These are the basics, data testing I need, and this is the basic care. We're just going to do this and we're going to lay out for you what we see and find. And there's so much relief in hearing what they see and find, but then there will be a block where they don't want to move forward. They're scared to move forward, or they just don't think they can, or like there can be like we're not deserving of doing like some bizarre stuff sometimes. And I'm like at that point, I mean, we're trying to get you to move into care. Obviously, we benefit mutually, but also I'm like, look, why don't you not start care? Why don't you go do any team? Because there's something here. And you also need to honor that because sometimes things come up for us where we're like, ooh, that's not for me. But there's so many blocks like that around, and we see in adults just the same. They find other things and they're like, okay, I have Lyme. Okay, cool. Uh, I think I'm just gonna come back when I'm ready. And I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. Just we're here when you need you. But there can be blocks there.
There can be like a lot of blocks of like even just learning to accept that this is your diagnosis.
Mm,
People grieve, like when we grieve about like this is a loss of my health,
mhm,
and I may not even be in a place because I am moving through all of this process of having to accept that this is even my life right now.
mhm,
And there can be anger, and then again when your body is processing through something like that, really does need to be ready to receive the care.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, chronic illness stuff because there's so much grief usually over the amount of life loss, whether somebody's like totally bedbound or they just miss a lot of things, or that part of things too can be a blocking factor. And I think about when so I had Lyme and then I had a tick bite and I was really sick and I talk about it sometimes on here. And for me, NET in that season was so helpful to like emotionally release and deal with stuff that like my neurological system, because I was so physically ill after that acute bite, I could barely like do life every day. I really couldn't. Like I had to have help. I couldn't get out of bed. There were so many things that I just couldn't do because physically my body couldn't recruit the power given the infection. But there were still stressful things going on in my life. And when those things would happen, my body would tank even more and it would impede my process. And I was at such a critical, very ill, physically depleted. Like Lyme just makes you so tired from the inside out. Like you just don't have physical capacity to recruit, and then it does all kinds of other things. Doing NET helped me process and let go of like things that were happening right then, but also all of the pieces because when you have a chronic illness, the prognosis of what you decide in your life things will be or what will become or what you'll be able to do because nobody knows. Like you're sick and you're like, I can get better, but you don't know that you will or that you won't. It can be so limiting. And for me in that situation, it was really freeing. It took a lot of that. It was just like short work on the emotional burden piece. Like it took that off the table, freed my body up more so that we could deal with the physiological pieces. So maybe that's like a good example because you kind of keep talking about the toxin piece. And that's one part of NET that I feel like I've experienced it, but then I've also don't feel like I have a good handle on it. Um, so maybe could you talk more about that? Like what kind of toxicities would limit a body?
Really good question that I don't know if I'm like, you know, uh,
Or like what do you see pop up? Like is it like toxic thoughts or is it like literal toxic relationship or I don't know.
I think it can be a lot of different things. I think there are when we have toxic, like when we have an emotional complex, like there can be physical toxicity, like that is kind of brewing. Again, when you have energy that's not released, it's going to stay in there and kind of grow toxic. Which, when you talk about like nervousness or worry or things like that, like that's resolving, it's working in the stomach, right? And you hear
Mm,
people get ulcers all the time, or it's
mm,
like moving into stomach cancer when that energy or when that toxic old stuff is not cleared out, like
mm,
it just sits there. So NET does a great job of like clearing out most of it, right?
mm,
And then sometimes like I'll check and see if they need a homeopathic remedy to keep clearing it out. So there's sprays that we use. So
mm.
that's about as far as I know, as far as
Yeah,
when it
yeah.
goes to toxicity. Like I know that there's some residual stuff that like the body just needs some support to keep clearing out what's still there.
You
So
know, it made me think of, and I don't know if this is, if I'm remembering correctly, but Babesia is like a parasitic infection that comes along with Lyme. And so for me, I'm like all the way better. Testing shows I'm better. I've been great for like a couple years. And I'm going to NET session where this one thing is stressing me out. And part of that toxicity of that thought process was that my brain was still thinking I was stuck with the babesia. Like it was taking for me. It was taking away. I think it was like being worried because I had such tachycardia. I had major POTS issues like onset after the bite. And so I was worried about traveling with my kids that my heart rate would do its crazy thing and then I would be kind of stuck. But it went back to that thought process of like that the babesia is still there to cause that physiological response in me and that was basically like a toxicity, if you will, that past poor it reminds me so much of mold people too, because your nervous system, yeah, I can drain you, I can bind, we can remediate and do all those things, but a nervous system that's constantly been detecting like a physical threat for so many years, it doesn't necessarily just learn like, okay, we remediated, everything's great, no need to survey and freak out anymore. Things like that even I think need the like stress closure that NET has to offer the body.
I think kind of updating the system is what I talk about. Like
Yeah.
system that we're not doing that anymore. And if I find that I'm still living in that, that is that's a mindset shift, that if there is an emotional response that keeps taking me back to that old, like I need to resolve that and I need to move on so that I can update my system and let my
Mm,
younger body know we're done with that. Because
yeah.
again, it's real and perceived threats. The body doesn't know to differentiate.
Yeah.
So if you keep telling it you're sick, it will stay sick. It will act like it's still sick, you
Mm,
know? I don't know
mhm.
how many times if I remember it was like there was a season I'm like I really wanted to get pregnant and I'm
Mm.
like I know I'm pregnant. Oh look, my breasts are tender. Like I think I'm a little nauseated. Like I have symptoms because it's like I guess we're pregnant. It's like no, I'm not.
Yeah.
Or if somebody really does want to be sick, it's like oh, like
Yeah.
you can make
You think
yourself
fine.
if you're thinking about things. That's why we have hypochondriacs. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I know I have this. Well, your body's like, we have cancer. And so,
Mm.
or even if I am like routine, I don't do this much anymore. It was an old version of me that would have so much fear and impending doom that
Mm.
my child was in a car accident and they died. And I
Mm.
would be imagining, oh my gosh, I'm at their funeral. And I'm like literally
Mm.
crying. And
Mhm.
in the other room, or they just went on a weekend with their dad, or like
Mm.
I have to remind myself like those things aren't true, but
Yeah.
my body was grieving like they were dead. And I'm like, this is stupid. Why am I
Yeah.
doing this? Alive. But that's kind of what our brains do is they will go different places. So I think you're right in the sense of like getting those thoughts lined up and those emotions lined up with what actual reality is super important in that healing process.
If you've been wanting to transform your health but don't know where to start, I've got you. My full color cookbook is much more than recipes. It's a 300-page crash course in healing through food. You'll get 125 plus gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free meals the whole family will love, plus step-by-step guides on shopping smarter, improving digestion, and making your kitchen a healing place. It's gorgeous, practical, and designed to make healthy living simple. Grab your copy at heyheymae.com/cookbook and start changing your health one delicious bite at a time. I think it brings so much freedom too with like the chronic illness piece because sometimes people don't realize the emotional patterns that are there that are part of the illness piece and doing NET and realizing like, oh, I had these two or three events that happened earlier in my life, which you always talk about, like, let's pull out the file drawer and see what your brain filed away on this topic. Sometimes it's really like little things like that where your parents treated you like this around illness, or you had experience at school with the school nurse around things. Like, there can just be stuff that's lodged in there that sets our viewpoint about our ability to heal or our ability to be well. And I think NET I just can't think of anything that would do a better job of finding those things and surfacing them and letting them like close out. We don't need you anymore. Thanks for being here. All done now, but like so efficiently. Um, and then really setting the body free into more just freedom and ability to like get to a better well place. So I am curious, like, are there certain types of people or situations or conditions or whatever that you're like, this is really great for NET or this is not, or even more stories you want to share around stuff like that. Like, I think about traditional stuff of like anxiety and depression. Like, is that something that NET can be helpful for? Because we think about it as being just this wet blanket you'll be living with. You'll have this thing. That'll be that.
Not really. I honestly, it's like NET is good for anybody, conception to like 125. Like anybody who's alive could benefit from NET.
Mm,
They're really, I know with EMDR and things, there's like some, hey, don't do that if you are prone to
mm,
seizures and stuff like that. There's nothing like that for
mm-hmm,
NET.
mm-hmm,
Honestly, it really comes down to, am I open to it?
mm-hmm,
Am I open to trusting my practitioner, open to believing things that I can't see but can feel?
mm-hmm.
Like it really is like the person who's open to it is going to benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Are there limits around kids doing it because they maybe can't verbalize things or they're not going to like cognitively understand always?
Like there, what when you have like a nonverbal kid, like you
Hmm.
can use
Yeah.
like a proxy tester. Like you can have like a mom, you can test for them. Like I've worked on dogs, like
Hmm.
because again, like I mean, I've worked on babies in utero. Like you just use the mom, or you use a proxy tester of like holding that person and tapping into the energy of the kid. And again, like you said, that fast tool, like you just teach them the fast tool, and they can connect to it. And doing your best, like to help them, releasing it for them or helping them release
Hmm.
those kind of things. Yeah, I mean, kids, we've worked with kids like elementary age or whatever, and it's like they understand sadness. Like they even have these lovely little emojis. It's like, can you
Yeah.
to which one, and then you can
Hmm.
help them find the meridian. And they're just like, okay, let's just breathe as you think about that and let it go. Like you don't have to be that angry anymore. And it's like
Hmm.
you see them physically kind of change, and it really is dramatic to be able to
Hmm.
actually sometimes get that original event like right when it's happening. It's
Mm.
powerful.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the fast tool is kind of like the shorty version of that like release phase, if you will. And it is fascinating. I mean, if the listeners haven't looked it up, you need to look it up and you need to go try and use it because you will feel like the physical release. Like you can feel your body relax. You may feel like you need to take a yawn or like sigh. There's just a real like calm thing that comes about once you've closed that stress loop physiologically. It's very, very interesting. And then it's like super powerful when you're working with a practitioner in there because like with a kid that's nonverbal, you're going to test and see what is resonating. And so is it organ stuff or emotion stuff? And so the kid doesn't have to say like, this is connected to paralyzed will. You're able to figure that out through the testing process and then kind of prompt the situation in whatever direction you kind of need to go if it's releasing it or returning to an original memory. Hmm.
Yeah, the fast tool is something like as even just as a human being, I'm using it every morning.
Mm,
Like I'll have my meditation time or I'll have my Bible time or, just my quiet time. And
mm,
oftentimes like I'm clearing out stuff from the day before, anything that's still there energetically, like I'm just like, it's gotta go, or
mm,
if I'm noticing, whoo, that client just totally triggered me, or, that
mm,
person cut me off in traffic and I'm like, all rah, and it's like be able to just to kind of manage my own internal world. That fast tool, you can use it anywhere, like
mm.
anytime. It gets so fast. Like it's just, again, 2 minutes of breathing on each side as you're connecting to those pulse points. Even if you don't like, you can identify those emotions as you're breathing through, but even if you're like, I don't even know what this is about, like just breathe and get some of that physiological stress out of your body. It does
Yeah.
help tremendously.
I always, when I think about you, which you'll probably love this, but it is what it is. I think about you being like, Elizabeth, you can do the fast tool like on the toilet. Like you can go away to the bathroom and do it for 2 minutes and then move on, okay? And I was like, that is so useful. I would never have thought about it in that sort of manner
When
because
are
I
you by
am.
yourself? I'm
Yeah.
on the toilet. Like I go there often. I
Yeah.
might as well make use of the time instead of being on a screen or something. Like let's
Yeah.
work it out, or
Yeah.
even I've been driving at a red light. I'm like, just a minute,
Yeah.
you know? And so I think just having it as a resource and remembering I can use this anytime,
hmm
teaching
hmm
kids that like just social emotional learning. It's just how do I become self-aware of what's going on inside of my body so that I can take ownership and responsibility for how I'm showing up in this world today.
hmm Yeah, that's good. Hmm. What's
Mhm.
one thing that you wish everybody knew about the body's capacity to heal when emotional stress is released or involved?
Like it doesn't take long. Like, I mean,
Mm,
I don't even a 50-minute session of NET is too long sometimes because
mm,
it's like that's so much you're bringing out. So
hmm
oftentimes, like my session will be like for the first 25, 30 minutes, it's like talking it out, identifying the problem, understanding where you might have felt like this before. Because we want to do the cognitive understanding of like, I can look through and figure out in my life when I felt like this and how it makes me feel and how I show up. And then it's like doing the body work is just like, I already know that. Like, I know where I'm going with the original event because we've already talked about it. It's
mm,
just getting the body in congruence with it. And so like the last 20 to 25 minutes or even sometimes 10 minutes, like we're clearing out a process.
mm,
Like, and it's fast, it's effective. It doesn't have to be this drawn out, huge emotional forever and a day thing. So it can be simple, but it's just so effective. What people move through, I mean, I sit back in awe of my clients when they just work through something so hard.
yeah.
Like for instance, there was one, she's just such a go-getter. I love her. Like she's just like, I'm going, we're doing this. And she's
Mm,
like changing the trajectory of her whole family because
mm,
her and her siblings were abandoned by their father, like
mm,
literally watched him drive away and they were on the porch, right? So, I mean, just so heartbreaking, right? I mean, she's like maybe 6, 7, I don't even know, just very early elementary,
yeah.
and just crying and not understanding why, right? And in the process, she was able to remember, yes, but my mom and my now stepdad came to get us, and they actually drove us away to the farm where
Mm,
we were forever taken care of. She couldn't even remember that part of it, and so she never connected emotionally with her dad or her stepdad.
mm-hmm.
Never called him dad her entire life. She was like,
Mm,
cause so stuck on this abandoned
yeah.
like response and always trying to get him to choose her, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
She clears that out. She has this huge emotional memory of like, but he drove us away and we were driving to him and he cared for us and so she went home that night, called him dad for the first time. And they're like, now it's just so sweet. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like it was so
Yeah.
powerful. And ever since then, like she just like we have a great relationship. I'm telling him I'm so sorry. Like I want to connect with him. And like she's got her whole life. Like she's in her early 20s and
Yeah.
she's had this huge epiphany. And because that memory was able to get cleared out and reframed, she's able to like live a different life now. So powerful.
I love that. It's such a good example too of like when NET is really helpful because I would imagine her mental process over the years from when that happened to when she worked with you was like leaning towards ruminating about that in some way, shape, or form, whether it's like feeling shame about not being able to connect with him or just remembering the situation. Like anything that we don't close out, our brains are going to conjure back up. Like, hey, Elizabeth, we didn't close, there wasn't anything that ended this. Could we maybe get it done? And it just keeps going until there is that closure situation in NET.
Can point out, like in her story, it started like the starting thing was she was stuck in a really unhealthy. Her boss was super narcissistic and abusive to her,
Mm,
but she kept
mm,
staying and
hmm.
giving because it reminded her of her dad.
Oh, yeah.
So being able to kind of target clear, I mean, it was really powerful. And she's like, "Yeah, I'm leaving my job now." So she
Mm.
was able to like find out how some of that old stuff was dictating how she was showing up today.
That's
And so
that forward movement piece I love because any like coming from destructive relationship community and understanding that a lot is like, yeah, we can all identify. A lot of times we're smart people and can be like, I know why I'm here and I know maybe where it came from a little bit, but the NET forward movement portion is the coolest part to me because it
there's a
does
lot.
bring
Yeah,
so much freedom.
that's why I love it.
Same, same. Well, unless you want to share any other wild stories with us, we
Well,
will.
no, I mean, I've shared a lot of, I think the ones that have
Yeah,
been super meaningful recently because it goes, I mean, just goes back to so many. So they're just countless stories. But again, I also want to encourage you, you'll never clear them all out.
that's true.
So
And
be
it's okay.
careful. Sometimes I think on our journeys to health, we kind
Mhm.
of get this, I have to be, now that I know this thing, I have to clear out everything and I have to be super healthy. And it's like, yeah, well, we're also broken bodies, like we're
Yeah,
never
what
going
can you handle right now?
can't necessarily resolve all of them. And that was wisdom. I mean, as I was talking to
Mm,
Dr. Walker, a couple of years ago, he's like, yeah, you're never going to clear them all out. And that's not really the goal, but it's to notice like, where am I blocked right now
mhm,
that I want resolution? And it's a great tool to use that, but don't use it as like, I have to start clearing out everything. Otherwise I
mm.
can't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And the body can only do so much. And it's really like the blocked piece, right? Is kind of like the theme or where you're stuck, the stuck and blocked places. It can
For
be
sure.
really helpful. Or just the repetitive triggers. I think about our PANDAS people. Like they're still taking care of their kids. They're like, I'm about to lose it with this one behavioral, whatever. Like that's a great place. Or if you're in a healing season where your body just can't with any more stuff, it can take the cream off the top so that you can get to the meat and deal with, the physical healing and remove some of that emotional pressure, I think is a good.
Right. And I think that's good to remember working, I had a client who's a panda's mom, and it was just like, how do we clean out the bucket so that you have room to put anything
That's
in?
key. Yeah.
It was just as a maintenance, like knowing that the crisis is still going until it kind of settles down or whatever. But there would be a lot of triggers going back to the original like before the diagnosis was there, and just
Mhm.
all the crazy and all the pain and all the things that were going on. Like it would just keep reminding her of that. And it's like you're not in that phase. You're
Mm-hmm.
you're 2 years later. You don't have to keep reacting like that. And so just kind of using it as a maintenance tool to kind of keep clearing out so that your nervous system can keep handling as you're walking through that.
Yeah.
Super important. Just a
Increasing that capacity and resilience. I also love how it uses homeopathy, and we don't have to get into that today, but I do love because really the theme of homeopathy is restoring the body to that vital force place where it can push the body forward to deal with stuff on its own. And all of that is just raising resilience, which I think is exactly what that, increasing your capacity is really the theme of what NET is after is increasing capacity and increasing resilience. And I think when you do an ET with a therapist, there's even more margin there for you to really increase your tools and therefore greatly increase your capacity and awareness and maturity and all those things. And I just really think it's fantastic and I love that
I
you.
do.
Well, where can listeners find you and learn more about NET and then also just about you and your practice?
So to learn more about NET, you can go to their website, netmindbody.com. They have tons of stuff on there, even their research. They're getting ready to start a new one that I really can't talk about because I don't even hear all the details of it, but it's going to
Mm,
be I love that they just keep doing more research to keep proving and showing people that this is legit because it
mm.
really is. Um, but you can read all about it on their website. You can even watch a Grey's Anatomy episode. They do a great job of depicting it. Did you know this? Like
No,
it,
I
yeah,
didn't know. That's cool.
actually highlighted NET, and I'm going to say it wrong, but it's probably somewhere in season 5,
Mhm.
episode 17 or 22, something like that. But Dr. Owen Hunt, he has PTSD from the war, and they go in and like you can see all the sprays in the background. They do the muscle testing and walk him through the whole thing. It's really kind of
So
cool. So if
cool.
you want to see a process, like an in-person process, you can watch it there. It's very well done. There was an NET
Hmm.
practitioner on site to kind of coach them through on how to do it. It was sweet.
That's
Um,
cool.
but I mean, my husband and I, we do NET. Actually, Max, I'm super excited. He's working towards a certification. So he is doing more NET in his practice as well. He's also trained in EMDR. But you can find us, like we're licensed in both Illinois and Kentucky. So our Kentucky clients are virtual. We can still do NET, but don't tell anybody. No, I'm kidding. We're supposed to do it virtually, but like, yeah, we can do just kind of walking you through the FAST tool. We can do different modalities in different ways to kind of help target that. But there's a lot of practitioners probably in your area. So on NET's website, there's a practitioner finder. You
Hmm.
put in your zip code and you see who's closest to you. And if they're certified, there's mind practitioners, therapists on there. There's body practitioners, chiropractors, acupuncturists, things like that. You kind of find what works for you, or just word of mouth. Keep talking to people who know NET because not everybody who's certified. I mean, there's still people who are not certified who use NET somewhere in your
Yeah.
area. So just
Mm.
keep asking. But you can find us at deeperrootscounselingmft.com. So it's important to put the MFT on there because there's lots of Deeper Roots counseling.
I'm
So
sure.
that's how we differentiate. But we're on Instagram, we're on social, Facebook, things like that. I don't post a ton to it, but they can also find us there. So
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. I'm going to end today with one more last question that I ask everybody. And this one maybe will be unique because you can speak on your experience, you can speak on client experience. What's one way that you've seen a client or yourself or your family be loved well during a season of chronic illness?
what I've seen is that when the people around them can offer patience and be empathetic and curious,
Mm.
like if you're the one suffering, like, or if you're the one suffering, like having people around you, like who love you well, who are patient, who are not judgmental, who are not dismissive,
Yeah.
and so I think being on either end of that, I've never, to say I've had like a chronic illness, like, at least I'm not aware of it. Maybe I should use your services. I probably would be like, but like I know that when people are struggling with chronic illness, like I think the most thing, like the thing that's so meaningful is when somebody does not dismiss their pain, that
Hmm.
they actually get curious about it, that they don't judge how they're being treated or what they're doing, like just being supportive. I feel like that has been hearing from my clients. That's the key part is be loving, be curious, be empathetic, and just be open, be supportive. And so I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question. It's kind of like, that's what I've seen is like when people
Yeah.
heal, that's the kind of support system they have around them.
Yeah, being believed in whether someone understands or not, I think is the big, big piece because we already know, and the NET is great for this too, is past medical trauma and things like that, where people have gone on a long journey to get better, or they've even been disbelieved by, processes that they're supposed to go through that are going to be helpful, but to be able to be seen and understood. And you don't have to understand all the way, but to be able to be supportive and kind of be willing to meet them where they are is really really a gift, and it's like the most human thing. Like it's I always say this isn't complicated. It's just like if you were sick with your flu for like several months, like what would you need in that instance? It's not any more complicated than that, but that's so great. So I appreciate you sharing. I hope lots of people find y'all and find NET and get some more freedom in their lives because it is such a good tool.
It's such a good tool. Thank you just for letting me share. I'm super passionate about it. So yeah, I hope everybody gets to find some healing practitioners in their area that they connect with because it is such a powerful tool.
It is. Thanks for listening. I hope you're leaving encouraged, curious, and hopeful. If you learned something, I'd love for you to share this episode with a friend. Hey, we're all healing together. You can learn more about my practice, our team, and what it's like to work with us at heyheymay.com. I teach lots on Instagram and answer questions each Monday. My Instagram handle is at heyheylizabethmay. You can watch these episodes and more on our YouTube channel at Hey Hey May. Learn about and enjoy our homeopathic line at heyheyhomeopathics.com. Happy healing!